Hello, money magicians. I'm currently in Vietnam, in Nha Trang. Don't know if you guys can see the back. So if you're listening, you're gonna have to look on YouTube to see what I'm showing everyone. That's the view from my hotel room. Is that just not gorgeous? The sun is rising, right? And look at that. Like that's what I've been waking up to see every day. So, if you've just joined us, my name is Vangile Makwakwa, and I am a money trauma coach. I help women of color heal ancestral money trauma so they can fall in love with their bank accounts, increase income, and live their best lives. So, it has been a long time since I've done this podcast, and ironically, I have been recording podcast episodes since last year, October. It's been crazy. I just haven't posted anything on this podcast. So I've got some episodes that I'm going to be posting up moving forward. And I've also been doing a lot of podcast interviews on other people's podcasts, right? But today I actually just wanted to talk about part of why I've taken such a long 1 year break from doing the podcast and then just be doing a bunch of other things in my life, like even traveling. I took a 6 month break from December until now in June. And these things are kind of correlated, right? So today I want to talk about visibility, feeling safe, public shaming, and going through that entire process and what that's been like for me. I'm working with a notebook because recently I've also had clients reach out to me and just be like, how do you go through ABCD when it comes to visibility, right? So, moving in Vietnam is actually such a huge breakthrough. Me going back to traveling is a huge breakthrough for me. So last year, people that I deeply trusted sent out emails and letters to embassies of my favorite countries, including Vietnam, Thailand, Sri Lanka, the US, Mexico, Costa Rica. So countries that I visited, and that some of these countries are really countries that I consider some of my favorite countries and that I consider healing places for me that I always go to when I feel lost and confused, right? And Vietnam definitely ranks really highly up there together with Sri Lanka. And I was branded a tourism fraud. They claimed that I was a tourism fraud. They messaged financial services boards in South Africa, different financial institutions, so that I could no longer get work and I could be seen as a scam artist, and that I should be written in the scam database. It's been a very messy process. So between October and really May, I've had to do a lot of things legally. There's been a lot of legal things in the background happening within Wealthy Money, right? And I had to get a protection order to protect myself and to just kind of stop the emails to clients, for one, emails to embassies, right? For me, that was one of the hardest things. I think of all the things, public shaming aside, I was called names, all sorts of things. That actually, I was like, you know what, people will call you names, they'll do whatever. But the thing that really hurt me to my core and shocked me was like having my passport circulated, a passport that I'd given to people, like copies of my passport that I'd given to people in good confidence, having all that information being circulated and then being labeled a tourism fraud so that I could no longer travel. it's taken me so long to get back into traveling because I truly believed that they had the power to make the embassies and all these countries stop me from entering any country, because they had told me that in private, that they have the power to destroy my career and they have the power to destroy me. I was told many things, you know. And I believed it. I deeply believed it. I would sit with friends and be shaking and be talking to family members. I'd be like, nope, they've definitely succeeded. My one cousin would try to convince me that, you know what, Van, I work at an embassy. Like, I literally hold like a top position. I'm telling you, they don't have that kind of power, but I believed it in my spirit, in my soul. And I think that was the whole point of it, right? Was that like I had to believe it, that I could not travel. So I was freaked out. I stopped wanting to do international travels. I didn't want to apply for visas. I just kind of hid. And in many ways, it was a good thing. And I'll explain why about what I've learned from some of my practices in Nichiren Buddhism. Before I started practicing Vipassana, I used to chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and one of the things that they talk about is turning poison into medicine, and this is something that I kept coming back to often, but I think this was my experience, and I'm really glad I had this experience because I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about many things, about beliefs, trauma, and how sometimes we give people more power over us than they really have, right? And that's, I mean, sometimes it's just a trauma response. Sorry, I'm moving things around the tripod, but yeah, it's all good. So yeah, that was my entire experience. And what happened is it left me feeling very unsafe, right? It left me feeling scared. It left me feeling ashamed, right? I think when people call you names publicly and vilify you, it can really make you feel ashamed. It made me want to go into hiding. But not only that, I stopped talking about any getaways I was doing because I didn't fully stop traveling. I've just been in South Africa. I did go to Mauritius. I did also, before everything happened, I went to Costa Rica and Panama. And then when everything happened, I went to Mauritius because I was gifted that trip. And even though every part of me was scared, it was a gift and I didn't want to just refuse it. And I'm glad I went. But then I came back and I've been doing a lot of traveling and exploring in South Africa. So I realized that I've always been a traveler at heart, right? But I didn't post anything. I didn't tell anyone. So few people in my life knew where I was going and what I was doing. Suddenly, I just developed this real trust issue because I didn't know who was going to say what, who was going to tell who, would I ever be banned, started having this weird paranoia, would Airbnbs that I've booked be messaged and told horrible things about me, would, if I decide to book for a particular country, would they email the country again? So even me coming to Vietnam was something that I kept to myself, which is so unlike me, funny enough. I just didn't want anyone to know that I was coming to Vietnam. And I'm still a little hesitant to share my travel itinerary for 2023, right? So it's been a very, very interesting journey. I've been in this space where I think part of me has been fully in hiding. And I think this is also why I want to do this podcast episode, to just share some of those things. And now they no longer trigger me, right? Like, I'm like, oh no, there's been a lot of work that has been done, right? And it's just, yeah, it's been a journey. There's nothing that I can really say. things that really, really bothered me and really, really hurt me, and why I had to go the legal route and be immersed in court cases. Like me, I've been in court this year 3 times, in fact, to try and keep my protection order in place. I'm waiting for the judgment to come through from the magistrate in South Africa. But I realized after a while that I couldn't live my life waiting to be protected by a protection order. Yes, it has kept me safe. I feel like it has stopped some of the craziness. But I realized that at some point I had to find safety within my body, and I had to start feeling safe and start getting visible and start getting back to my life and start traveling despite the fear, right? So that has been a big thing. It's about feeling safe to be visible, right? And I learned a lot in the process. So when I was applying to come to Vietnam, oh my God, getting the visa. So here's the whole thing that's happened. So since COVID, South Africa, I guess, because of everything that was happening and we were discovering the new COVID strains and everything, we kind of got a different visa. I don't want to call it a visa restriction, but it is for Vietnam. And I didn't know about that, because coming to Vietnam for me, this is my 5th time in Vietnam. Coming to Vietnam for me has always been such an easy process, right? It's so easy for everyone, really. You go online, you apply for an e-visa. This time I found out that South Africans can't get e-visas. So I called the Vietnamese embassy in South Africa, and they are all like, nope. You need to get a Vietnamese tour company to sponsor you, and you'll get the visa on arrival. So I'm already like anxious because the embassy has been emailed that I'm this tourism fraud, and now there's all these other visa restrictions. So I had to contact tour companies that I've worked with before in Vietnam, thank goodness, right? So I'd worked with this one company to get me visas in the past, because sometimes I'd like leave my visas to the last minute, and then I'd need a visa letter in 24 hours. So I needed them to help me get a visa letter, and they helped with the whole process. But then getting here, I was still really anxious. I was still really unsure, right? And after all that, I mean, it was one of the ease. I don't think I've had more ease getting in and out of immigration in my life than what happened after all that drama, right? I was like in and out like that. Like I was picking up my bags. I even had to ask the airline to change my flight, because I was taking a forward flight from Ho Chi Minh City to Nha Trang. So I was so early, so they had to change my flight, and I was here so quickly. So that was really, really interesting. And what that taught me was that, you know, I spent months of my life giving away my power to people because I really believed that they could destroy me. And there's nothing, and that not only could they destroy me, but they could destroy my career, right? Because they had told me they could do that, right? And then they had gone ahead and done certain things to ensure that. And I felt it, right? Because there was a time when I was losing clients, my business was bleeding money, I had insane expenses from legal fees, and I just thought, this is really happening. They really have that power. And I think that's also why I stopped traveling, because I really believe that the embassies also believe this. Why would they not? I've since learned that there are processes and procedures. There are things that embassies, financial bodies of financial institutions, companies will do before they label you a scam. You know, there are investigations and procedures and processes. But I honestly didn't know that, because this is the first time I've gone through this process, right? And it has gotten me thinking. So for the last 2 weeks, really, I've just been sitting and thinking about, where do I give my power away? Where have I believed that other people have power over me, more than the divine, more than what my ancestors have a say in. I just really believe that there were people that had more power over my life than anything else. And that's been really, really shocking. That's been really, really weird to realize and have that experience. And in so doing, I just think to myself, wow, I could have continued to believe this for another 6 years, 7 years, and stopped traveling, you know. But for whatever reason, I did the work and I decided, let me try, let me see if my beliefs are real or not. So, who are you giving your power away to you? No, who are you giving your power away to? And how are you doing that? How is it stopping you? Right? And if you had to stop giving your power away, what would it look like? So those were the questions that I started asking myself. And for me, honestly, I realized that it would look like me going back to my life and living the life that I've always desired and dreamt of living and that I'd always wanted to live, which was a life of travel, of exploring different cultures, different foods, different people. And I had to try. And it was really crazy because I'd even had a backup plan to go to the Philippines. One of my assistant, Pearl, is from the Philippines, and I messaged her and I was like, I really want to know if there's which cities in the Philippines can I go to, because I was like, well, if push does come to shove and I get to the airport and I am indeed persona non grata and I'm not allowed in, I need to be able to find another country that is visa free, that they have an email that I can go to. And I chose the Philippines, right? And I now know that like it's an interest of mine to go there. But luckily, none of that happened. And a lot of that was in my head. So I realized that, wow, people destroying me and having the power to destroy me, having the power to destroy my career, that was in my head, right? And so now I'm like, it's cool. I know, like, there'll be maybe one day more people that tell me that, more people that do other things, but I've come to the conclusion that no human being actually has a substantial amount of power over another human being. I mean, different in dictatorships and in war-torn countries and all that. But in all honesty, at the end of the day, we can find ways to take our power back. And I know that seems impossible in some of the most impossible situations. And maybe I'm still speaking from a position of privilege and not understanding a lot of things about politics and how the world works. But I think that there is a part of us, no matter what happens, that we can just go in there and find something that can't be taken away by another person, right? Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to do a whole podcast on how do you maneuver this? Oh, I forgot to mention that as all this was happening, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but I've sent out tons of emails in the past about how Dr. Miranda and I started a Property Stokvel from the Property Magicians podcast. So from the Stokvel came this, we've had so much drama where like the developers that we've loaned money to have been refusing to pay. So we've had to hire lawyers to liquidate one of the guys that owes us money. We've had to hire one person to help us get the money back after the legal process has been frustrated in one deal. And we're now working to get the money from another developer. But all these things are happening in tandem and are still in the pipeline. So as I've been going to court for wealthy money to try and keep my protection order in place, because they've been fighting that as well, that the protection order is apparently like frivolous, that I'm wasting court power. I don't know, something about court powers, that I'm abusing court powers. So all this stuff has been happening, and it just wow, it just really made me feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so not good enough. I completely suck as an entrepreneur, I completely suck in business. But I also knew that I had to keep showing up in my business. I had to keep showing up in the Stokvel, that I couldn't just be like, oh, people are not paying and just crumble as all this other stuff is happening in my life and in my personal life and in my business, and wealthy money has been affected, right? So I did a lot of crazy inner work. And I hope that this helps anyone that's going through a public shaming or going through any kind of fear that other people may have power over you, or that you can be destroyed, or that whatever people say has more power and sway than what is the truth, right? Is that firstly, is one of the things I had to do was work on the shame that I felt, right? And I had to go back to understanding how shame works. So when there was this public shaming incident where I was called all sorts of names, and a lot of people that didn't even know me jumped on board, my first instinct was to hide. I went to the village, which is probably a good thing, to see my mother, right? And I went and I stayed in my mother's bed, and I was like crying because I was like, oh my God, I need mommy love, even though my mom and I don't have that kind of relationship, right? But I think that little girl in me needed that. And then I wanted to hide. And then I was hiding for the longest while, and people were sending me messages, and some people were trying to be helpful, sending me screenshots of what was being said about me for days on end, and I was crumbling. I remember calling my sister and being like, I don't think I can live through this. I don't think I have the capacity. And that was just because it wasn't because of the public shaming in itself. It was because it was coming from people that were so close to me, that I trusted, right? And then when I saw all the things that they had done around emailing the embassies, emailing the financial services boards, and then just like talking all these things, sharing with clients, etc. And I just felt so much shame. I thought, who is ever going to believe me? Maybe I am this horrible, awful human being that I'm being told that I am, right? And I remember my mom coming, and I was just like in tears crying, and she just said, I don't know what your plan is, but all I know is that you're not going to sit here and cry. You can get up, meditate, do whatever your healing work is, pray, talk to the ancestors. That's still something. And you can go and talk to your lawyers and just do anything. But this is not the way that you're going to deal with this, where you're like sitting undercover and hiding. And I remember just thinking for a split second, oh, this woman just never understands anything, you know? And my mom just said, listen, this is part and parcel of running a business. You keep saying that you want visibility. Guess what? This is the flip side of visibility, you know? So I was like, what? I remember just thinking, what the hell? But I got up and I started doing EFT tapping, right? And I just did EFT tapping, I kid you guys not, for a solid 10 hours. I don't think I've ever tapped like that in my life. For 10 hours straight, I howled, I cried, I moved around, I just breathed. And after that, it was like something deeply shifted in me. But I did so much work on shame. And then after that, I realized that, whoa, I'm feeling deep shame. So the whole point of what happens, and I started to understand why visibility is so scary for most of us, is that when you're on the receiving end of that, there is so much energy that is being thrown at you, right? It's not the best energy, right? It's not the best energy coming at you. So it kind of like all that energy that is being sent to you, and it's negative energy, you're absorbing it. You're one human being and you are just taking it in. So you have to really become energetically strong. But if the shame is also rising to the surface, because you're human, right? I'm human. So the shame was rising to the surface. And as the shame was rising to the surface, my very instinct was to hide, because shame, as I talk about in Heart, Mind, and Money, is an emotion that makes you want to run and hide, right? Really simple. It makes you want to run. It makes you want to stick your head in the sand, and you never want to take action after that. So I had to remember how shame works. And one of the things I did was I worked a lot on shame. I did a lot of breath work on it. I did a lot of just EFT tapping on it, shame about everything, because I just felt like I was this monster of a person. So I did a lot of work on feeling like I was a monster. And it took me a solid 4 or 5 months to get over that, by the way. So I started working on that in December. And I think it's only by the end of April when I started to feel less shame and started to then question the things that were being said about me. I had, but the other beautiful thing is I got support, right? And that's the second thing that I want to talk about, right? Is that when you're going through a public shaming, and or you're being harassed in any way or anything, just the one thing that really helped me was to get support, right? I had 4 coaches during this process, right? So I had like my 4 usual coaches, which was kind of nice because these were coaches that had worked with me for a while, so they knew me. So I had my 4 coaches, and I was having coaching every other day. So I was having 4 coaching sessions a week, really, for different things with different coaches. And it kind of helped keep me sane, because as all this was happening, I really didn't think I could continue running Wealthy Money, right? Firstly, I thought I can't continue with running Wealthy Money. Everyone believes the things that are being said. Everyone hates me. I'm a terrible person. What else? Oh my gosh, like how dare I show my face in public? Who would want to see my face, So I had to get the support. And not only did I have coaching support and emotional support, some of my coaches are also business coaches, right? So we could like put things in place, and then I could in those sessions have full on meltdowns, and also figure out after every session, what is the next thing to do with my business, and how do I work with my team? And the first thing was to tell my team, this is what is happening. Here's how it's going down, and I do not have capacity to do anything. Oh my gosh, do I have the most incredible team. Like for months, everyone just stepped in, and I was just doing the bare minimum, because I needed to just keep myself sane and alive. And that's when I also realized that the power of having had systems in my business and having had the team in my business was serving me, because my team knew exactly the work to do. They continued to post on social media. They continued to do everything. At one point it was crazy, because like everyone was getting calls from the lawyers, and we're getting guidance from the legal team as well. And that's the next part of the support, was my legal team, right? It has been incredible. Like I feel like they were like my priests, my everything, They would just like give advice. And at one point, one of my, before I changed law firms, I think that the previous law firm that I had was really, really concerned. And they like had this long pep talk with me that was very Zen and Buddha, and just told me, Van, we've been through this before. You're not the first person. Trust us. This is a normal way of doing business. This happens to almost every business owner. This is part of visibility. Please don't be worried. And at the time I couldn't hear it, but months later, that conversation and the advice that they gave me would come back and be so handy, just like telling me, you know what, just be okay, you know. And till now, they still check in on me. That was my old law firm. Then I changed law firms, right? But the old law firm still checks in on me once in a while, and they just like, how's everything going? How are you feeling? So that was really, really beautiful, right? So just having that, and also because I didn't know, and I feel like having legal guidance has been one of the most transformative things, because some of the things that when I got the support, the first things that my lawyers asked me that when I changed law firms, they wanted to know, do you have non-disclosure agreements? What do you have in place? Contracts, etc. Turns out that my company has had none of those things. Like, I've been operating on blind trust and faith, and actually I've always not wanted to have any of those things in place, because I think part of me felt that, oh, that means that like it looks like I don't trust people, right? And then the first things we started doing was to get those things in place, to like, now I have contracts with everyone. You know, I've got NDAs with clients. So if you want to have access to me, to talk to me, you need an NDA. Like, that's just the way I roll now, right? And a lot of things were explained to me about business. I feel like I had to grow up fast. So I'm really, really grateful for that. And now my next step is to trademark stuff, right? Is to trademark stuff within Wealthy Money, part of my work. So that's the next step. That's the next step in putting more things into a trust. I have a trust, but making sure that things are in the trust for the businesses and everything. So it has been a process, but also just a beautiful process, thank goodness, you know. I say beautiful process because, guys, I've lived through my worst fear, right? And my worst fear has always been being publicly shamed and being visible. And one of my greatest fears is an inability to travel, is not having the ability to move around and to be free, really, to have a say in what I do and say in my life, right? So that was one of the biggest things. So I feel like I've lived through those fears, and that's why you'll keep hearing me say, oh, what a beautiful journey, because I really feel like the last 9 months have been that for me. I've been through hell. You know, like, I literally looked at a part of myself, like I said, and was just like, there's no way I could live through this. And then making the decision that I'm going to live through this anyway. And then I think the next thing that I want to talk about is, when you're going through a process like this, it's about regulating your nervous system. Really, that's my next point, is regulate your nervous system. Because, as I said, you've got all this energy coming at you, right? You've got people saying things about you, people who may not even know you personally. We will never ever be able to control another person. That is a fact, right? But what we can do is look after ourselves when things are going bad, right? Regulate your nervous system. Look after your nervous system. Okay, so the sun started to shine brightly, and if you're watching this, you'll notice that like I closed the curtains just because I was like, oh, I don't think you guys can see me anymore because the sun was shining so brightly. I love it. Like, I've been waking up at sunrise to go to the beach, to swim, to do stuff, which actually ties to regulating the nervous system. So one of the first things that I did when all this was going on was I prioritized yoga, right? I prioritized breath work. I prioritized EFT tapping. I prioritized really just focusing on looking after my body, looking after my nervous system. I did breath work like it was going out of fashion, right? A huge part of that was that I also didn't want to get involved in whatever was happening externally, because I felt like that my lawyers were taking care of things legally. But it was really, really hard to sit and watch all those things being said. So my only thing that I focused on more than anything was, how do I regulate my nervous system? How do I regulate my nervous system? And thank God for the Money Magic course. I mean, honestly, thank God. I did so much work around the nervous system and breath work and EFT tapping, right? So do what you need to do to be able to regulate your nervous system. The other thing that I did, obviously, is I got massages. But not only did I get massages, I also started doing a lot of Chinate Sang on myself. So Chinate Sang is belly work, right? And I would do a lot of belly work on myself, where I do belly massages, just allowing myself to work with the triggers. And that's also my next thing, is to say, work with your triggers, right? So for me, one of the things that I've always believed is that healing, you're going to be triggered. Being alive is you're going to be triggered. And that part of expansion is being able to hold both the good and the bad, right? And as I said, my lawyers didn't even bat an eyelid. They were just like, this is part of doing business and you don't have any non-disclosure agreements. So that was a big thing. And so I think that's one of the things that I started to realize, is just, okay, let the lawyers deal with the legal stuff, but I get to work with my triggers, right? And as everything was happening, I was getting more and more triggered. My not good enough wound went from just like, oh, I thought I dealt with this, to it felt like I'd done nothing over the years. I was like, I have dealt with nothing. My vow of invisibility went sky high. I thought I had dealt with my vow of invisibility. Heck, for the last 9 months, really, I've been dealing with my vow of invisibility. It's taken me literally almost a year to get back onto recording a podcast episode, right? So just work with your triggers. So for me, the one thing that I had to work on was healing my not good enough wound, right? So for a long time, so that was my next step was, so after I started doing all these things, at some point, I think by January, I started going back into the Money Magic meditations, and doing meditations that were not just breath work, and doing just not EFT tapping, but actually doing the other meditations. One of the meditations that I have in the Money Magic course is the not good enough wound, right? And healing the not good enough wound. So I truly believed that I sucked at everything. And ironically, one of the things that I'd also been told by same people, right, was that this podcast, the Money Magic podcast, was awful, that I was awful as an interviewer, that I ramble, that no guest that has ever been on the Magic podcast actually liked being on the podcast, that they hated this podcast, and that being on this podcast was such a painful experience. So that shook me. And I think that's also part of why I haven't wanted to bring out any episodes, because I think deep down, I believed that as well. Not I think, I did. I know I did. I believe that nobody liked this podcast, that nobody likes it, that nobody finds it helpful. I believed it for months. Now I don't, right? The universe is a beautiful place, guys, right? So I've had people email me, message me, send me money just to say thank you for this podcast. And so in the face of my beliefs has been also the reality, right, of what the universe has been sending to me. And I think that's also why I was like, I need to do the not good enough meditation, because this is not something that is factual. It is something that I have internalized, because one of my primary wounds happens to be not the not good enough wound. So usually um, for years. It took me a long time in business. And I think this is also why my previous businesses failed, was that like, if people would criticize me, I would crumble, right? And so I started doing the money magic work, and then that sort of stopped. I could take criticism, I didn't mind feedback, but what I didn't bargain on was what happens when it's people that you love and that you trust, and it's not strangers, and they give you this information, and they have been on the podcast, right? How do you deal with that, right? And I crumbled, right? And that's okay. That's totally okay. I am sort of glad I did, because it gave me an opportunity to go back to the trigger and to go back to doing this work. And now I know that like I'm stronger, like I've done the work, and it's not to say that next time someone even closer to me won't say something and I won't crumble for months on end. But at least now I know that I've always got the tools. So I went back to the not good enough wound and I started doing the work on it, right? I just did the work. And it was hard. And one of the things that I uncovered in that as I was doing the work is that there's something fundamentally wrong with me, right? Like I held that belief, that there was a belief deep down within me that there's something fundamentally wrong with me and nobody likes me and that I am difficult to love. So some of those beliefs come from my mother, right? But there's something fundamentally wrong with me. It just comes from myself, I guess, when I was hearing that, because when my mother would get upset and as a child, right? And in my teens, my mom would say, like, you just like to make yourself difficult. You make it so difficult to love you, right? And I think I internalized that. Not I think, I know I internalized that, right? I've got proof from my meditations. I internalized that. And then part of that internalizing was that belief that there's something fundamentally wrong with me. And then I had to work through that. And I cried for days. I did so much work on that, right? And eventually that belief no longer holds that charge for me, right? I can talk about this. I can really relax around that as well and just be okay with it. And I realized that at the core of my shame was also that like deep down I believed that there was something fundamentally wrong with me and that I was difficult to love, right? And as a result, I felt such deep shame, because if your mother believes that, how else must the rest of the world what else must the rest of the world believe, and what must you think? So I feel like there was something, so I held on to that shame. And so this entire incident just triggered all these things. And I truly don't know if I could have gotten to the depths of some of these beliefs without this incident, right? And that's where the idea of turning poison into medicine comes in, right? So something hectic happened, but it also became my medicine, right? And I just saw such an incredible shift. And I'll talk about some of the breakthroughs that have come from that, right? From doing the work. So then the next thing that I worked on was the vow of invisibility, because obviously if you're feeling ashamed and you feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with you, that you're difficult to love, that you're difficult to like, then you probably believe that people are going to reject you, nobody's going to believe you, nobody wants to see you, and then you just want to hide, put your head in the sand. And my vow of invisibility came up fully strongly, right? It has been so hard for me to get back on social media. It took a lot for me to start getting back on social media, to start doing videos. Luckily, when all this was happening, I remembered that I could get support. So I hired someone. Now I have a team member who works with me on my reels to do TikTok reels. And I decided I'm going to get onto TikTok and do reels on TikTok. But at the same time, I was going to work on my vow of invisibility. And then I started getting back into doing Zoom sessions and doing master classes and just showing up. Because guess what? When the vow of invisibility is fully in place and you're not able to show up, that means that I'm not able to market for my business. This means that like I was literally not bringing in new sales in my business for months on end. I was not actually growing my revenue and I was stagnant for a while, right? So as I started to work on the vow of invisibility, I was able to show up, to start selling, to start opening up to receiving money, and so that my business could grow. I could pay legal bills, not just for wealthy money, but also for the Stokvel, right? So that was huge for me, right? And then I think the last thing that I want to talk about is if you are running a business and maybe you are struggling with the vow of invisibility, like I was, the not good enough wound, the shame, and all of this makes a beautiful, perfect cocktail to make you want to hide, never sell anything, and just really believe that people are going to reject you. At least that was my belief. After all the work that I've done, I truly believe that nobody found value in my work, that everything that had been said about my business and my work was true, right? I believed it on such a deep level. I smile now because I'm just like, wow, you know, like I really, yeah, like beliefs are a powerful thing, guys. Trauma is a powerful thing. Childhood trauma, all that stuff is just so powerful, right? So one of the things that I had to do was to do the bank account challenge, because as I was running, as I wasn't bringing in new sales, my expenses were increasing, because remember, I now had like legal expenses that I've never had before. I now had to hire more coaches to help me get through all this. So much in my business started to just get very compromised. And the only way that I could make it through, that I believe that my business has been able to make it through, that wealthy money is still around today, is that I sat down and I went back to basics and I started doing the bank account challenge. I wrote down, I started tracking everything in my bank account. I observed my emotions whenever I had to talk about money, spend money, etc. I wrote down every belief that I had about money that was showing up, right? And ironically, like I started making sales without ever selling, never showed up to sell, but people were reaching out and were saying, oh, I saw your podcast. Yes, the very podcast. That's why I was like, I had to really, really work and unprogram certain things within me. Again, I don't think that it's wrong that people said that was said to me, because I believe that everyone has a right to their opinion. I just think that people are allowed to say whatever, right, about our work, etc. And people will never ever be able to stop people. But it is how we receive it, right? And clearly there was still so much within me that needed validation and seeked validation from friends and family and people that were close to me. So everything that they said, I didn't realize it, but like still that those people close to me, whatever they said and thought meant so much that it had the ability to cripple me. But honestly, that is not how expansion works, because there'll be so many people in life that will always have something to say, and that's okay. You can never ever stop any of them. And the work is how you receive it, how much of that you internalize. And I obviously internalized a lot, but I digress. So one of the things I had to do was to do the bank account challenge. I had to start tracking everything around where the money was going. And I'm so glad, because the bank account challenge is obviously a course in Wealthy Money Academy, just like the vow of invisibility meditations and the not good enough meditations and all the nervous system work. It's all in the Money Magic course. So I went back to the bank account challenge and I started tracking everything. I did the basics from scratch. I made sure that every single thing I spent was in the spending manifesto, and that the spending manifesto was in alignment with my core values. And I tracked everything. And I had to, because my lawyers, just for one day in court, so I've spent 3 days in court. One day in court is 32,000 Rand. Right? For the Stokvel, it's 59,000 because we're going through a liquidation process, or 53,000, sorry, because we're going through a whole liquidation process. So that's not to mention affidavits being written. For an affidavit, my lawyers would be charging something like 18,000, 20,000 Rand. So I'll just do the US dollar things, maybe like divide by 50, or divide by 15 or 18 or thereabouts, right? And that was how much I was like having to pay every time. And I think every single month I was getting invoices, not counting the Stokvel stuff, right? Because that also, we were also getting invoices for that with Dr. Miranda, with Mizo. And for me, I was getting like crazy invoices, like 40,000, 50,000, 32,000. So imagine sustaining that and getting that like every single month for 9 months nonstop. I was losing it, right? So you're going through one of the worst things that you're going through, but your legal bills are piling up, and it's not just for one company, but for 2 companies, and it's for many different things in the other company as well. So I was just like, I can't do this. And the only way that I kept sane when all this was happening was to do the bank account challenge, was to keep track of everything, was to be able to look at my bank account, was to be able to sit with the sensations in my body, was to be able to observe my breath. And it was powerful. And of course, I had my coaches, but I also had the work. So I was able to just do the work and just do the bank account challenge. And that helped me tremendously. So yeah, I think those were some of the things that I did. And I hope that this helps some people that are going through something, especially if you're living through your worst fear, right? And if maybe your worst fear is visibility, that is really a thing for me. I feel like I've learned so much about visibility in the last few months. I feel like I learned so much about expansion. I learned that expansion is not all ease and glam, which I've always known, and that expansion is not all about just like expanding so that you can hold all the good stuff. I learned that expansion is also the ability to expand, to hold the downsides that come with the upsides of expansion, right? And sometimes the downsides can be like, whoa, mama, right? I realized that, oh my gosh, there are certain expenses that I could have had in the business, like having legal insurance for the business. Ironically, I have legal insurance for my own personhood, personally, but not for the business, right? And not for the Stokvel, not for Wealthy Money. So it's been learning processes. So I did all this work. And what were some of the breakthroughs? Oh my gosh, guys. In October, my new book launches. I have a publishing deal with Penn Macmillan. I officially signed a publishing deal with Penn Macmillan. And I was given a publishing advance. I was given an advance, and I have seen the cover to my book, and I'm super excited. I wrote in the process of all this happening, so all this drama is happening around me. I had to write a 104,000 word book. Wow. I had to work with editors. I had to work with publishers. Oh, and it was very, very awesome because I also had to take feedback from publishers and editors and everything. So that was interesting. That was a journey on its own. I had to really sit down. So one of the biggest breakthroughs was I learned that it doesn't matter what is happening, the work works, and I'm able to just do everything. As everything is being said about me, I was able to just somehow dig deep, find it within me to sit down in front of that computer and write. And not only write, but make the edits and make the changes and make it make sense. So huge breakthrough for me. The book is really, really something that I really treasure. My publishers required me to do lots of research. I was questioned about a lot of things. So I have I had to read like hundreds of theses. I'm not even joking. I read hundreds of theses. I remember one day when I realized that I had been reading a thesis that was about 300 pages, and I was just like reading. And at the end of the day, I was like, all I used was like a paragraph to like distill that what I had read in that research to a paragraph. And that was my life for months and months on end. So it actually worked out that I was in the village and I was with my mother, and that there's not much happening in the village, and I could just shut down and just focus on writing. And it also helped that like I was fully in the throes of my invisibility and my shame, because I could just sit and write. I didn't have the distractions of social media. I went for months without Facebook on my phone, without Instagram on my phone, without anything really on my phone. I would just log in through my laptop, and my assistant was taking care of everything else, right? And I think that kind of helped. It just meant that what else could I do? I'm in the village. There's not a lot of excitement happening, all sorts of things. I believe that nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody wants to see my face. So I wrote, I read, I wrote, and I did, and I wrote, and I feel a really incredible book. I emailed certain clients. I did interviews. I did case studies. I did research like I've never done research on a book before. So that was incredible. So that's one thing, right? And then my mother gifted me land. I know, like my relationship with my mom hasn't always been the greatest, but this entire incident also showed me how much of my relationship with my mom has completely shifted. The one person I never thought would stand by me fully and support me and just be there for me every step of the way was my mom, honestly, right? But my mom was there, guys, like in ways that I cannot even explain, in every possible way. And then when she heard that like I had this desire to do student accommodation, she then went, and this happened, she did this all in 24 hours. So she hears me talking about like, oh, I wonder if there's any students in the village. Wouldn't student accommodation be interesting? She goes, she finds out about if there are any colleges, because she's like, no, there are FET colleges here. There are colleges and things here in the village, and there are NSFAS students. I truly believe that. She went, she used her connections in the village, she called around, found out that there were indeed colleges and NSFAS students, and then she then decided to buy my sister and I land. And it's really beautiful pieces of land that we can develop. So that was so beautiful. Like, and it all happened within 24 hours. Within a week, I'd gone to the chief, we'd gone to the title deed office in the village, and we'd gotten our title deeds, which was phenomenal. Then I found out, then I was in meditation one day in January, and I was told to go ask another chief about a piece of land, and I was able to negotiate a deal and buy myself a piece of land. And again, thank God for the bank account challenge, because I was like, I have no clue how I'm going to pay for this, because like I was literally like, this is crazy, like how am I going to pay for this? And the land has got the most incredible epic views. It's on the mountain, so 2 hectares, and then there's mountain land that is not counted in that 2 hectares, but that is my land that is part of the mountain. So I have way more land, right? And I can see the sun, that that piece of land has got the most gorgeous sunsets. Now, anyone that knows me knows that I'm a sunset person. Just the most insane sunsets there. So that was incredible, and I've been able to pay that off, right? And I truly believe that if this entire incident hadn't happened, I would not have been in the village. My mother would not have been able to hear about my desire for land and buy me and my sister land. I would not have known about. I would have not gone to ask the chief about this piece of land, which turns out to be the last piece of land that he was selling in the area. I mean, it is so crazy, right? So I wouldn't have gotten 2 extra pieces of land. And then I was gifted trips, so many travels. And then, and those were gifts, right? And I still cannot believe it. Gifted a trip to Mauritius, gifted getaways all around South Africa. I've just been traveling, and so much of it has been just gifts of love, right? So beautiful. And also, my sister got me a Birkin bag. Now, if you don't know, Birkin bags at their worst are like maybe 25,000 US dollars. At their best, they like can go up to the tune of like $200,000 or something ridiculous. People insure those bags. I had no clue. So I'm like, wow, bags are an asset. Like, women's bags literally are assets. Some of these bags are not to be looked at and trifled with, These are real things. So my sister got me one, and that's still just like incredible and insane. She does this thing where she sources in terms of fashion and decorating and things, and she finds like incredible things along the way. So I was a recipient of that. What else, right? So I'm back to traveling. So that's awesome. I was gifted an Airbnb to take over the lease of, and the furniture that comes with the Airbnb, so that I can start an Airbnb business of my own. Wow. Right? So I'm actually in the process of getting that Airbnb up and running. I haven't had to buy any furniture at all. So I'm just doing last minute touches here and there, and it's really not that expensive to do. And the Airbnb is in the best part of Johannesburg, which is Sandton, right? And it's just perfect. I don't know what else to say, right? I'm sure there's so many other breakthroughs that I have had that I haven't been able, that are not coming to mind, but those are the material breakthroughs, right? I'm still debt free, so that is kind of like a wow, right? So I'm still debt free. Mizo and I are still working on the Stokvel to get stuff done. I'm still waiting on the protection order to hear what the court decides, if the protection order stays in place. If it doesn't, it means that I will constantly be criticized online, and they can continue to send emails to embassies, financial services bodies, all sorts of things. And I think I've had to be okay with that, because at first I realized that I was also putting so much of my ability to be safe in that. So I think that the other breakthrough is coming back into my body and finding safety in my body and reclaiming my own power, and realizing that no matter what happens, no matter anything that is said about me, anything that is said about my business, any kind of shaming that I have, that like actually I do have it in me to go through everything, to be able to work through whatever is happening. And then I think the other huge breakthrough for me is to see the power of my own work. How? Guys, like, as all this was happening, who would have thought that my mother would be the person that stands by me fully? And when I say fully, I mean, fully. There was a time when my mother didn't want me to buy even groceries because she knew how much I was spending on law bills and everything. She gave me her car to go around in because I sold my car in 2021 when I was in South Africa. Yeah, so it was just, it's been amazing. It's been incredible. Like, just also just wow, my cousins supporting me, my aunt, my 80 something year old aunt coming to court to be with me. It's just been the support. And I think so one of the biggest breakthroughs that is, and I think this is a priceless breakthrough. So I've shared the material breakthroughs, but I think often in our breakthroughs, we don't talk about the non-material breakthroughs. Oh, the other thing that I forgot to mention is that I was also gifted support in terms of rezoning. I bought land last year in Cape Town to build 8 units, and then I've been gifted support in terms of help with paying for the rezoning. Not me. I really thought that all those things, I needed to pay for all these things, right? So another material benefit, right? But like so many people in my life have gifted me. I felt, and then so the other intangible breakthroughs has been, I always believed that when something like this happens, part of why I've always been scared of public shaming and all this is that firstly, I believe that nobody would ever believe me because at school, that was always the case. I was always the child that was bullied, all sorts of things, and nobody ever believed anything good about me. Or that's how I felt, right? My teachers believed like, oh no, this can't be true, all those things. But I always felt like if this happens as I run this business, nobody would ever believe it. Everyone would believe whatever bad things were said about me, all those things. Firstly, my family didn't, right? They were just like, no, Van, these are not the things. Friends from university messaged me and called me. They were like, no freaking way. You may be a lot of things, but no, And so people stepped up to just help me, to support me. I never felt alone. This is the first time in months that I am alone and doing a solo trip because nobody would let me out of their sight because nobody truly wanted to because people were so worried and they wanted to like really see, is your mental health fine? Are you okay? Right? And just to see that was incredible. So I realized the big breakthrough was that all my fears were unfounded. I've lived my whole life being so scared of being visible, being so scared of being publicly criticized because I thought at the end of the day I would lose love and I would be utterly alone and I would have absolutely no one by my side. And the major breakthrough for me has been I've lived through my worst fears and I was never alone physically and even emotionally. I was fully supported. My relationship with my mom has never been stronger. I was loved. I've been shown love, wow. People checked in on me. People I loved, family, friends. It's been amazing. So the biggest breakthrough for me has been to see that actually all the fears that I had were not true. I believe them, facts, right? I truly believe them. But also the realization that they were not even slightly true has been amazing. So I think that has been one of my biggest breakthroughs is that I will not end up alone. People do not hate me. There is nothing fundamentally wrong with me, and I am deeply loved and lovable. Those were the things that I realized, right? And that actually people do want to work with me. Companies do want to work with me. I still had companies reaching out to me. I still had people wanting to work with me. I got my publishing deal. I got all of the things, right? And I think the other big breakthrough was to learn to trust my life, really and truly. I think I used to talk about trusting the process, but I don't think I really knew what that meant. And I think that as I started to really focus not on anything else that was happening, but trusting the work and trusting the process, all these other beautiful things have happened. Like my asset base has increased tremendously. I'm seeing new streams of income coming into my world, into my life. It has been just wow. And my one coach was saying to me, Van, she was saying this in May. She was like, it's only May. And you're already telling me that like you're going to be moving forward with the development in Cape Town. You're telling me that you're going to be having an Airbnb. You're telling me that you're going to be doing all this other stuff with the land and stuff. And I was like, isn't it interesting? Isn't it wild? Right? And yeah, I didn't realize that, right? And the other major breakthrough was to say, as I trust the process, I don't have to be the one to make everything happen, right? I can open to receiving, and I may not always know how I'm going to receive things, but that's the whole beauty of receiving. And as we do the work and we clear away the gunk, the receiving happens. Like, I feel like my receiving set point has gone up a few notches, right? Since everything has started. Like, I mean, my receiving set point has gone up a whole lot. I mean, how I was gifted land, right? Furniture and Airbnb lease to take over, all that. It's like gifted help with the zoning so that I can move forward with my building plans. That is crazy. My receiving set point has gone beyond. Like the things that I'm receiving are beyond. Gifted international trips, right? It is just insane. And a lot of that I truly believe is because I've had to go deep down and do the work around not being good enough. And I think as I started to do that work and felt like I am good enough, I finally felt like, wow, I am loved, I am lovable. So it is okay to receive, right? It's not a fluke, and things shifted. So yeah, I hope this helps you guys. And the journey in itself really was one of the scariest things that I feel like I experienced in a long time. But now that I'm coming out of it, because I'm not fully out of it, right? I'm still in the midst of it. I'm still coming out of it. But I feel like I'm less scared. I feel safer. And those are priceless breakthroughs. Those are intangible breakthroughs that are completely priceless. No one can make us feel fully safe, right? We have to do the work on safety. So if this is resonating with you and you're thinking, wow, this is insane, and maybe you want coaching support, firstly, I have been in Vietnam, resting, frolicking, swimming, sleeping. And one of the things that has happened is that I feel super rested. I feel ready to go back to one-on-one coaching, but I don't want to do more than one client at the moment because I have been very tired. So if you're interested in one-on-one coaching and individual coaching, hit me up. I'm doing 6 months of coaching and I'm charging $20,000, 20,000 US dollars per person to coach for 6 months with me. So we do 6 months, but we do 3 weeks of coaching. So we do 3 weeks a month and 1 week break or 2 weeks break in a month, depending if it's a month with 5 weeks or 4 weeks. So my coaching sessions are about 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours at a time. Usually 2 hours is enough. And we do that, and then you get homework as well, you get work. And what I would really love to do is hold space for someone who is feeling deeply scared of being visible, who is struggling with visibility, who is struggling with self-criticism, who is struggling with the not good enough wound, who doesn't feel like they are enough, who feels like they need to do a lot at the moment, and is wanting to also increase their receiving set point and really increase their income. So if that sounds like you, hit me up. I do have payment plans in place for the $20,000, right? So you can pay over 6 months, the 6 months that we work together. So I'm only taking one client at the moment, one-on-one client. Yeah, and I haven't taken on a one-on-one client since 2021. I stopped one-on-one work in 2021, and I'm sort of glad because I needed all my faculties about me in 2022 and 2023, but I have been doing the mastermind and it has been incredible. I've been holding space in my group coaching program, which is the mastermind. I'm opening that up for people to take in a new cohort of clients for that in August, and I'll talk more about that in future podcasts, right? But if you are thinking, oh no, I'm not ready for one-on-one coaching, then I want to invite you to check out the Money Magic course. You can, the Money Magic course is lifetime access. You get access to the meditations that I've mentioned. You also get access to the bank account challenge, and that is $444 per month over 20 months, or $888 per month over 10 months. Or you can pay in full and get a 20% discount, and that will be $6,999 once off. So if you just want to have a conversation with me and you want to have a discovery call and you want to find out more, hit me up. So just click on the link at the bottom of this video or in the show notes. If you're listening to the podcast, reach out to me. Let's have a discovery call. Let's have a conversation. If this is truly resonating with you and you're like, I want to work with you in some way, let's have a conversation. So guys, I feel like I've said a mouthful. And I hope that this has been helpful. As you can see, I'm no longer torn apart, right? I'm smiling, and I'm really open to just coming back, recording the podcast. I'm looking forward to doing live videos all over the place again. I feel rested. I feel really like a lot stronger. And I'm looking forward to whatever is next. And hopefully you guys will leave me comments. Let me know your thoughts on this podcast and this particular episode. And of course, if you found this valuable, please share and subscribe. Thank you. Have a phenomenal day further.